Well, good evening and welcome everybody. Welcome to a new part of Bank of America Merrill Lynch. We've never been here before. Welcome to our lovely white sofa, which might give you a hint of Graham Norton for tonight. But tonight, it doesn't get much better for being British. That's working, isn't it, at the moment? And I'm not talking about the Lions' victory on Saturday, which I'm sure Bill was very happy about. Nor Andy Murray yesterday, nor the fact that Britain was just voted the third most innovative country in the world last week. I'm talking about 5 days of sunshine predicted, which will mean we have a weekend and another weekend with sunshine in between, and it's terrific news. But we mustn't let all that happiness distract us from what is a very important task tonight, because we are not on the cutting edge of sustainability tonight, we are on the bleeding edge. We are looking at how organisations can measure the value of social programmes. And I was talking to someone earlier and he said, I've been researching ahead of my roundtable, and it feels to me like the social space is where the environmental space was 10 years ago. And I think I'd probably agree with that. But I think the potential for this space to transform is potentially much greater than the environmental space. So it's a really important area to be. Can I just get a show of hands who here saw the Meaningful Brands Index that came out a few weeks ago? So we've got about 5 or 10 people. It was a really interesting piece of research by Havas Media, very comprehensive. They looked at they went to 130,000 consumers in 23 countries, and they asked them, which brands do you rate as having social purpose? And they found that 23% of those brands had or are considered to have social purpose, and I don't think anyone would find that particularly surprising. But what they did, which was very interesting, was they then tracked the performance of the companies behind those brands against major stock indices, and they found that those brands outperformed by 120%. That's pretty much like the best hedge fund returns. And I think the importance of that is that we are already in an era where social purpose and shareholder value are connected. But the difficult part then is how individual organizations connect their social programs with their shareholder value. And that, I think, is where we're at the bleeding edge. So tonight or this evening and for activities around, we're crowdsourcing the latest thinking in this area. We're crowdsourcing through 4 avenues, through blogs. So thank you to the 14 people who wrote blogs ahead of this event. They're very interesting. We'd encourage you to look at them. We've got a survey, which Doug here is about to talk you through the results of that. So thank you for filling that in. We've got a fantastic panel discussion, which you're about to get. And then we have roundtables. And so if all of you can really use those roundtables to share your knowledge, we will then, with Fishburne Hedges, go through all of the results and pull it together into a crowdsourced report, which will come out in August. And we're really trying to create change here. And so there's a great opportunity tonight. On the subject of change, I'm now going to introduce Doug Johnston. Now, Doug himself hasn't changed, I don't think. But the organisation he works for, Ernst & Young, or what was Ernst & Young, has changed. They're our main sponsors, and they are no longer Ernst & Young, they're now EY. And if you look behind me when they rotate round the right place, over here, their new logo, or their new moniker is Building a Better Working World. And I think that's very interesting for tonight. So Doug, can I hand over to you? Maybe tell us what that means.
So most of you possibly called us EY or E and Y, but we've now dropped the Ernst & Young and we are purely EY. But probably the most important bit is the strapline. The strapline to our brand is Building a Better Working World, which we believe captures our social purpose. So our whole business is about building better businesses, and by building better businesses, our focus is around how can we help those businesses to contribute more to a better working world. So that's why we've chosen that strapline. So basically, our social purpose has now become an integral part of our brand. And, interesting that we're talking about measuring social value tonight, because my team are actually working with our brand team to look at, well, how do we measure how we're delivering on that, how we're helping to build a better working world. So thank you to all of you who filled in the survey. You were asked a number of questions about your views on measuring social value. And we've got some interesting results. So let's go into those. So you were asked initially, what in your opinion, and how important is it for companies to tackle the following social issues? So basically you were asked to rank a range of social issues in terms of low, medium, high importance. And here we go. So number one up here, probably no surprise, was working conditions. In relation to the dreadful things that we've seen in Bangladesh, I think working conditions has certainly come right up the agenda as a really important social issue. But also, look at this, tax avoidance. I guess possibly a year ago, tax avoidance wouldn't be up there as one of the big social issues that organisations need to grapple with. And then there are a range of other issues, the skills gap. So let's move on to the next slide. But whilst I do that, I think one thing that's really important in terms of the importance of social issues is somebody commented in the sort of free-range answers to this question that actually the appropriate social issues will be unique to each individual business. So every business will face a broader range of social issues that are relevant to where they operate and the nature of their business. So for example, if you're a drinks company, probably your biggest social issue would be drinking awareness and the appropriate use of alcohol, as well as many of these topics here. Or, we've got Telefonica here tonight as well. They would probably have a different range of social issues. But this was done from a very sort of generic perspective. So the next question got on to, well, how effective do you think organisations are in tackling these social issues? So as you can see, the blue now covers ineffective, whereas the grey and the yellow are highly effective. So as you can see, you've almost got a reverse statistic here, where the importance of the issue is mirrored by a view that the controls are either ineffective or quite effective, is typically the norm here. We did a little bit of analysis on these numbers. Well, actually, Jim did some analysis on these numbers. And we allocated scores to different answers that were given, such that we could look at the importance of the issue with your views on the effectiveness of the controls to look at what the gap is in between. And look here, interesting statistic here, tax avoidance. So in relation to you guys saying it was the most important issue, there was a more significant gap than any other issue in terms of your views on the effectiveness of the controls on that particular topic. And similarly, there was a big gap as well in terms of poverty alleviation, and then topics like youth unemployment and the skills gap. So there is a mismatch between what you, business practitioners predominantly, consider to be the most important social issues and your views as to the effectiveness of the controls with which business approach those topics. So, moving on. Which of the following areas of business value do you see as most linked to social programs? So the view is that not only does a business in addressing social issues generate value for society, in doing so as well, a business will generate value for itself. And I know one of the tables tonight is looking at the concept of shared value, and that's very much at the heart here. So right up the top is employee engagement and retention. Employees really want to work for responsible businesses, and how an organisation responds to social issues is a really important part of what makes them feel great about the organisations that they work for. Also high up there is reputation. If you manage social issues well, you can build reputation around these topics. You become a brand that's known for trust and responsibility. Surprisingly though, less than 50% of you highlighted brand value and licence to operate. And those are sort of the two business reasons why most organisations, when I've seen papers go to a board, will highlight the importance of managing social issues effectively. Be interesting to discuss some of this as we get into our round tables. Okay, so how effective is your organisation? This is very much back to you. How effective is your organisation at the measurement of the value of social programmes? So, surprisingly, more than 50% of you across both measuring the value to society and the value to your business said it was quite effective or very effective. Interesting, given that most organisations that I meet with would say, actually, our measurement of the social value that we create or the value that we get from our management of social issues will say it's highly ineffective in many cases. But here, it's important to say that less than 10% of you, however, said that the measurement of social issues was very effective. And the bit that you can't see is the not sure, which was actually larger than the very effective. Okay, moving on. So remember what we said in the last slide. You said less than 10% of you said that the measurement of social value was ineffective. It was very effective, sorry. Whereas here, over 90% of you, almost 100% of you, are saying that the measurement of the value of their social programs is either critical or important. So, if it's so critical and important, why isn't every organisation starting to measure the social value that they create through their response to important social issues and social impacts? Why aren't organisations starting to understand how they can generate business value through being more responsive to it? I mean, I pose that question to you. Potentially, it's that these things are very difficult to measure. Potentially, different stakeholders will have different perceptions of what good looks like and therefore what to measure. So it'd be interesting to unpack this. But there are some organisations that are starting to measure this, and it's starting to not only drive the way in which they respond to the specific management of those social issues, but it's also starting to affect the way in which they measure their overall contribution to society. Okay, so the last question related to, I think it's the last question, wasn't it? No, there are two more. Okay. This question looks at the, how organisations are starting to think about their spending. Now, about 40% of you said that spending was either going to increase by up to 10% or higher than 10%. So that's interesting, but actually also quite a few said it's going to stay about the same. And my time is up, but what I want to leave you with is that this just talks about social spend. But actually it's not just about social spend. This is about how an organisation measures its overall contribution to society through everything that it does. So please, don't limit the definition today about how do you measure your social programs. How does an organisation measure its overall impact on society and the difference that it can make? So I'm going to leave you with that. I think these results are going to be published, Jim, at some stage. They'll certainly be on the website. So please look out for that if you'd like to sort of get into the detail in a bit later on. Anyway, Jim, thank you.